Welcome to Lou Palumbo's Between the Lines. Problem solving for our future. Lou. Common sense, logic, and reasoning. Lou. The man that can't stand hate and animus. Lou. Stimulating the thought process of America. Lou. Where being right is not political, it's factual. Lou. Providing real solutions in real time. And now, here's your host, Lou Palumbo.
If you haven't realized that the world's gone to hell in a handbasket, I don't know what to say to you. I wish I could say it was funny, but it's not. There is absolutely no humor attached to anything that we're dealing with today. I guess the president recently revealed the agenda quite clearly. That is, we're going to, I guess, muscle and disrupt most of America's lives so they could make a transition into a form of energy that is not ready to be transitionalized into. I don't know how disturbing this is going to get in the future, but I think this summer is going to be quite telling when it comes to how much struggle the middle class and the poor people, I don't even know how to quantify their day-to-day living, absent of this lunacy. I guess this is part of this green energy, which I believe anybody who's sane, rational, and reasonable is in favor of, providing that the mechanism that we're transitioning to is prepared to accept us in mass numbers. For example, we have 285 million motor vehicles in this country. Don't take me on my statement alone. I'd like you to let your fingers do the walking, become an investigator. Growing exponentially every day as the population grows, that number grows. About a month or two ago, the Transportation Secretary decided to disclose that they were going to invest billions of dollars in these charging ports, which is quite an interesting concept unto itself. One question I have is, when you pull into a charging port, are you going to be able to recharge or refuel your electric car as quickly as you can with gasoline? That's one thing. So there's a lot of questions here of legitimacy, and unfortunately, many Americans are questioning the credibility, the integrity, and the honor and the intent of the government. And I just don't know where to go with this thing. You know, I don't think they understand the hardship that the poor and the middle class are incurring right now with this dramatic increase in gasoline prices, which, by the way, is going to impact your children, how you're going to be able to take care of them. Forget the vacationing and going to Disneyland or to McDonald's or any of these little accoutrements attached to their daily lives that they look forward to. This is traumatizing America. I don't know why the Republican Party, and I'm not saying this because I'm anti-Democrat, why the Republican Party does not move to impeach this man. This is one disaster after another. And unfortunately, attached to the disasters are mistruths or disinformation, or however they would like to quantify it in the political arena. He's speaking as to Putin's influence on the price of gasoline. What they've neglected to tell you is that the price of gasoline went up 41% before he invaded the Ukraine. I'm not even going to critique the fact that we did not respond appropriately to the massing of troops along the Ukrainian border by Putin, number of roughly 70,000. I'm not going to speak to this thing in Afghanistan, this withdrawal. That was, I don't say it was less than honorable, it was just inconceivably ill-conceived. You know, we left $85 billion of weaponry. We abandoned Bagram Air Base. We threw these poor women and children who we breathed life into back into the dark ages. This just goes on. And I remind everyone, the greatest immediate threat to our national security is Mexico. Border, not the country. Although Mexico has its problems with drug cartels, which we can go off on a tangent, which I'm going to try not to do with you today. I'm just struggling. Your major cities are imploding because of the crime. I somehow wonder how Gavin Newsom and this governor in New York, Hochul, sit there, look at their cities, and just lack the compulsion to insinuate themselves into this discussion as to how to get the cities back on track. I'm struggling here, folks, and so should you be. We're struggling in many ways. But worst of all, it deals with the credibility and the future of this country, which is really about our children. We're watching the Sussman trial that, with the exception of CNN, no one on the left, quote unquote, has decided to give it any life. Well, they've got a problem there. And not because you're a Republican or a Democrat, because there appears to be some form of subversive activity that's been uncovered. The aide to Hillary Clinton volunteered the fact that she authorized. This is not somebody's opinion, so please understand what I'm saying to you. This isn't someone's opinion. This is testimony under penalty of perjury. Plus, Sussman lied to the FBI, which is a whole nother deal. That's a felony unto itself. You lie to a federal investigator, a U.S. attorney, any of these mechanisms, Department of Justice, that are attached to our government. It's like a catch-all. Even if we don't catch you doing the dirty deed, we got you for lying about it. Well, here they caught him doing the dirty deed, and they got him lying about it. And by the way, it's been reported in a couple of different outlets, not just one, because I know everybody thinks Fox is the only one chasing this story, and it's not the truth. Other people who are independent of their politics are following it as well. Simply stated, he lied to the FBI as to his intent or his agenda in informing them of this alleged Russian connection. You know what's interesting? The people in this country are having a very difficult time wrapping their arms around something. Hillary Clinton is a bad person. Bill Clinton is a very defective person, okay? I'm not going to critique any of his sexual exploits or solicitation of women while he was married, sitting in the White House or the governorship in Arkansas. We have a problem here, folks. You can turn a blind eye to it if you like. That's up to you. You will reap what you sow. This isn't about politics. It's about the truth. And I want to remind everyone about Tulsi Gabbard when she threw her hat in the ring to participate in the Democratic primaries. Mrs. Clinton once again referenced her as a Russian asset without absolutely anything to back it. And so you know the backstory there. Tulsi Gabbard was the number 2 in the DNC 2016 under Wasserman Schultz, and she backed Bernie Sanders. That's where the animus came in. All right, guys, we're going to get ready for the show. We're going to have an interesting one today. We're going to have a lawyer on who's presented a lot of cases before our Supreme Court, and I think we're going to touch on and the issue of gun control also. Our first guest is Joel Oster. He's a constitutional lawyer, having served as a lead attorney on cases brought before the Supreme Court. He is also a CLE instructor, speaker, podcaster, and I guess comedian. I guess he's able to find humor in a lot of this. I got to ask him about that one. He has his own podcast, Debriefing the Law with Joel. Okay, so we want to get him on. Joel, is that you there, buddy?
I'm on.
How are you doing, bud?
Oh, pretty good. How are you doing?
I'm good. Where are you currently?
I am in, make sure I just like coming through. I am in Kansas City.
Kansas City. Been there. Nice people. Great cops.
What part?
Is this is Kansas City, Missouri, Kansas City, Kansas? Because we got two Kansas.
Exactly. I'm on the Kansas side. Kansas City, Kansas. The city itself is extremely small. We're talking like, 100,000 people. There's no Royals, no Chiefs. It basically doesn't exist. But no, we have NASCAR, so that's something.
Was my client, by the way, for a very long time, NASCAR. The decades.
Really?
Yeah, I know Mike Hilton very well and the whole entourage there. We used to have their award shows in the Waldorf Astoria every year. It was initially the Winston Cup, then it went to Nextel. It went. And they left us after the city of New York fleeced them financially and motivated them to go to Nevada, to Las Vegas. And they've been there for a while. And now I think they might be around Tennessee, but we still have a little bit of a relationship with them. We bump into them in New York every now and then on certain security details. Great group of people.
Yeah. They have a track just down the street from where I live, and so it's kind of nice to see the flyovers right over my house.
A little noisy, though, I would assume.
I had no idea how noisy NASCAR was until I went to my first NASCAR event. Wow, that is an amazing. You cannot even hear yourself do anything. It is fun.
I'll tell you the other one. I was at the at some type of Grand Prix at the Indy racing track in Indianapolis, which was another interesting experience. I was down in what they call the pit, which is a place I don't know why anybody sane, rational, reasonable would stand, because if those cars go out of control, you're basically fodder. But let's get into this show today before you and I continue to socialize here. So I know you're an attorney. I gather you're fairly well established. If you've presented cases before the Supreme Court, you must have some wherewithal. My producers, Mr. Molander, Mr. Spurgeon, Mr. Rossell, have informed me that you are constitutionally driven. So are we going to talk about the Second Amendment today, Joel?
We can talk about that. We can talk about whatever you want. Supreme Court justices, right to life, affirmative action, whatever. I guess if I don't know about it, then we can always hit the delete button.
Well, let's talk about the Supreme Court justices just for one moment, and I think you might concur with me. We're watching them, and I'll preface this by saying that I participated in the security detail protecting our federal judges for at least 25 years, starting in the Waldorf Astoria, currently in the Hilton. So I've dealt with the U.S. Marshals, great group of guys and girls. So I'm a little confused, Joel. We have them protesting outside the homes of our Supreme Court justices. Clearly, that's in violation of federal law. Have you heard the president critique or tell anybody back off, or the attorney general or Homeland Security, any of these mechanisms that are there to kind of keep us in our lane? Did I miss something here, Joel?
Oh, I hate politics. Man, do I hate politics.
This isn't
politics should play.
First, this isn't politics. We're going to talk the truth. This isn't about political flavor. This is about the truth. I would say this if it was a Republican or a Democrat. So please understand that part of this discussion.
No, I think you're right on. But I think the reason why Biden is not coming out and saying anything is like, it's a shoe we're on the other foot. Both sides will be flipping script. And whenever that's a scenario, it's pure politics and I can't stand it. Yes, absolutely. They should be outraged that the lives of the Supreme Court justices are in danger. This is the Pelican Brief, in real life. And everyone should be up in arms over this, but no one cares. Everyone's talking politics about, why isn't Biden condemning these protests outside of the justices' homes?
How about this, though? Let's give the president a pass for a second. Where's the Attorney General, the highest ranking law enforcement official in the United States? And where's Mayorkas, the Homeland Security? I mean, in other words, if the president said, guys, listen, this is why I gave you these cabinet positions to manage issues like this.
Right.
Has everybody fallen asleep at the wheel, or are they out at tea with crumpets or scones what's going on here?
They tend to do things based upon their base, what's going to make a difference in the next election. That's probably not a talking point that will give them points or motivate their voters. And so they do not do it. That's why I can't stand politics. That's why I wanted to be on your show, because hopefully we can maybe find some rational ground.
Well, and I think that's the thing that left the discussion, Joel, that there's no longer rational ground. There's no longer a decent, civil, respectful exchange with people we're electing, and even the media, who I really believe are driving the divide in this country, and the misinformation is coming from them. But, it's about a position of compromise. For example, we're going to go right into gun control, for example. I think you're probably aware that we have at least 500 million guns in this country that we can account for on the conservative side. I'm struggling understanding anybody thinking we're going to have gun control in the form of taking guns away from people. But why aren't we having a discussion about eliminating the possibility of the mentally ill or the emotionally disturbed, for example, getting their hands on guns? Excuse me, Joel. Where's the discussion there, buddy? This is not about politics. It's about the health of our nation and our children. I don't get this.
Right. It is hard to have a conversation on it, because you're on both sides. You have these special interest groups that they are so paranoid about giving up an inch, afraid to give up an inch. And that means they lose all of their arguments. So they won't even talk rational grounds. If you want to go back to the Supreme Court case, Heller, District of Columbia v. Heller, back in 2008 or so. Yeah, the court said that those would be rational restrictions on the right to own guns. We were talking about the felons, for example. They should not be able to get a carry permit to help them with their next felony. And so the court did give its blessing to certain kinds of rational, reasonable restrictions. I think these are the kind of restrictions that 90% of Americans would say, Yes, I agree on that. But those make sense. We want those kind of restrictions in play and just leave the outer skirts to go fundraise with their own talking points.
Joe, why aren't some of these issues taken out of the hands of the elected officials and put out to referendum to the American public? For example, you just spoke to the support of elements of this Heller decision. If we witnessed, as we did, what happened in Newtown with the shooting of these poor children, initially Obama wasn't going to go near gun control because the Southern conservative Democrats told him, if you do, you're going to lose our support. Those are the constituents, right? But say after that, suddenly he's motivated, and he went after one thing. He went after closing a loophole at a gun show, right? Where you can walk in, pick a gun up, hand him cash, and walk out, which is just insanity, Joe. Whether you support the Second Amendment or not, I think you'll agree. And supposedly, according to the polls, the majority of the people in this country were in favor of it. We couldn't get that. We couldn't get that through, Joel. Something as fundamental and basic as that. So where are we?
If you were to talk to put that up to vote, now a lot of people do not want to put those things up to vote because their issue is, well, gun control is a little bit different. But I think the vast majority of political issues, the side that is supposedly campaigning on your side doesn't want to change that because that's the motivating issue as that they can encourage you to go out and vote on. Take right to life, for example. Why would a pro-life legislator want to actually fix the issue? Because then that will not motivate their constituents to go out and vote. In fact, it'll be a motivation for the other side. And once you realize that the people you vote for certain causes don't actually want to fix it, because that means that will no longer be a wedge issue motivating you to go out and vote. I think that's when your eyes are really opened. That's when you're taking the blue pill versus the red pill to give you a matrix reference. But yeah, when you're talking about gun control, where are we right now? Well, they have a New York State Rifle and Pistol Association v. Bruin is before the U.S. Supreme Court. And that's going to be, I think the court has on real dicey grounds here because they don't want to give any momentum to people to go out there and do these mass shootings. That's not what they want to do. But yeah, they want to create this right to defend yourself. So they're going to try to walk the narrow line on that case.
You know what? And I'm glad you brought that case up, Joel, because I did want to ask you about it. I knew you would be literate in that area. Just speak to exactly the meat and potatoes. Joel, I want to say one thing to you. We're going to have to go in about 30 seconds, but when we come back, I want to speak to the meat and potatoes of that case before the Supreme Court right now because it addresses a number of issues, and I know you're aware of the New York SAFE Act. The interesting thing about the gun legislation is it doesn't translate to reduction in crime. That's the interesting common denominator. Guys, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to be right back. I have with me Joel Oster, one of the good guys. We'll be right back. Instacart, another interesting concept. You can go to your favorite grocery stores, sign on to their application without leaving your home, the comfort of your home. Just pick out the items you'd like. They'll assign a personal shopper for you and deliver them to the point that you would like them delivered to. Another great concept, very user-friendly, and I'll be honest, we use it also. It's very effective, and they're very, very good. They're very on point. Okay, we're back. I have with us Joel Oster. Gentleman is an attorney, and he's presented quite a number of cases before the Supreme Court. He is also a CLE instructor, speaker, podcaster, and he seems to find humor in this. God bless his soul. And he has his own podcast, Debriefing the Law with Joel. So, Joel, I want you to just go in and just speak to the nuances of this case being presented before the Supreme Court right now out of New York.
Yeah, well, the issue in this case is, do you have a right to have a gun to defend yourself for self-defense? Is that a right that you actually possess as a citizen of the United States? Because what's happening in New York is in order to get a gun, then you have to apply for a permit. Well, if you want to say, I wanted the gun for self-defense, they will say, well, is your life really in danger? Because you need to prove that you actually need it. You're in some kind of dangerous area before they will give you that permit. Well, right out of the gate, I don't think the people in New York understand how muggings work. You can't pause the mugging mid-mugging, say, hold on one second, Mr. Mugger, can you give me a moment? I have to go apply for a permit now. But nonetheless, that's what this case is about. This case is not about what the court said were these sensitive areas like football stadiums, schools, universities, places where alcohol is sold. what the Supreme Court likes to do is the Supreme Court likes to find very narrow ways to rule most of the time. And so in this situation, I think they're going to find the narrow ground. They're not going to do some kind of broad statement on gun rights. They're just going to say, yes, you do have a right to self-defense. You don't have to prove to a government official that you need it for self-defense. That in and of itself is sufficient. And but this is not going to extend beyond that scenario. Interesting.
Just something I do want to mention to you, you might be aware of. I think we now have 25 or 26 states that have what we refer to as constitutional carry.
Okay.
I believe most recently Georgia signed on, Indiana, last September 1st was Texas. You know, we're getting what I would say for the anti-gunners, opposite of the desired result. This is why I think instead of us continuing to bang heads on this issue, it might behoove us, especially since it impacts our children in learning institutions, to try to get the cuckoo back in the clock here. You know, I had someone call in on my show, Joel, and the guy spoke to the HIPAA laws, which, you know, we know what the HIPAA laws are. And he said, why don't they try to step away from the HIPAA law when someone is diagnosed with a certain mental affliction, schizophrenia, you know, psychotic, right, whatever it is, or is taking antidepressants, say any number of variables that should legitimately prevent them, at least temporarily, from having access to firearms. But the interesting part, Joel, is we don't even have a database to provide information. So a gun dealer, when he runs a NICS check, the National Instant Criminal Background Check, can access anything other than the fact as to whether or not you're a convicted felon. You know, so why is it? And you know what's so interesting, Joel? It isn't just this issue; it's every issue that we're looking at. Where is the inability to understand that the borders? We need some form of mechanism that regulates this border, so we don't have millions of people swim across the Rio Grande every year. I mean, what's going on with the country? What's going on with the government?
Right. Haven't the Democratic presidents also been saying the same thing? And I believe the Republican president said that as well. Look, we need to have compassion for those that are in the United States, but then stop the problem of illegal immigration. And so, yeah, why are they unwilling to actually do that? Do they want to just say that when it comes time to campaign, but the fix is a lot more messy? I don't know all the politics that are along with that one, but you're right. It does seem that if you were to go back in previous years and listen to the tape, you'll hear Clinton, and I think even Obama and Bush all say pretty much the exact same thing, which Trump said. But since Trump said it, of course, it has to be bad. So now Clinton and Obama and Bush were all wrong with that. But it's like, yeah, let's show some compassion for those that are here, but at the same time, let's fix the leak.
You know, and I agree with that. And in one instance in particular, Joel, I heard of a deportation of an individual. I think he was a business owner here illegally, 25 years, you know, grandchildren here. Suddenly we realized, you know, that you crossed the border. I mean, shame on us. But, you know, there are people that suggest there's another agenda attached to this. But I do want to say one thing. And I repeat this all the time to people because it's important, it's relevant. Our population from 1970 to current has grown 135 million people. We're at 335 million people now.
Okay.
Is there a certificate of occupancy on our country, Joe, like you and I would have in a restaurant?
Right.
I mean, how many people are we going to allege we're going to be able to care for? We're not taking care of the people in the country right now, Joel. Let's be honest. Veterans, homeless, elderly, mentally ill. Even our children, we're not taking care of them. Suddenly they've been on the slide with this nonsense going on in educational institutions. You know, I think we need to, I would say, introduce in this government some type of voice of reason that is able to appeal in a very broad stroke to the public through common sense, logic, reason, and this word I love the most, truth. You know,
here's a position I think the vast majority of Americans would agree with. And that is, if you got to America, however you got to America, I have no idea, but that's in the past. If you are a tax-paying citizen, you live in a place, you're working, you're paying taxes, your kids are in school, hey, that's great. Let's stay here. We love the fact that you're here. Welcome, and come over to my house and we'll have a barbecue because I'm from the Midwest. And so I think the vast majority of Americans have no problem with that. Also, I think the vast majority of Americans have, at least I think this is true, maybe you'll correct me if I'm wrong, the vast majority of Americans have no problem with, look, if you're just coming over here to be a burden on the system and to just get the free check, that's a problem, because that is going to be not a sustainable situation. That's going to collapse on itself. And so since the vast majority of Americans agree on those two principles, why can't they have common sense laws regarding that? Because,
again, you brushed on it, the political agenda, the word we don't like, politics. The unfortunate part is, and they better hope Donald Trump doesn't get back in. And I am not going to be shy about saying I don't think Mr. Trump is good for the country at this point, because we don't need anybody else polarizing us. We need a leadership that galvanizes us, but we're going to see massive deportations. What's occurred at the border is tantamount to an invasion. When millions of people cross your border in a 16-month window of time, we have a problem. I mentioned to people we have 700,000 plus gotaways. Everybody goes, how do you know how many got away? Well, drones and cameras, knuckleheads. Right. And let me just tell you something else that's alarming, Joel. That's almost as many law enforcement agents as we have in this country. We have about 800,000 law enforcement agents. We're overtaxing the law enforcement community. So, I don't want to keep running on. I want to give you an opportunity. I want to ask you about your comedy. What's the deal with that, Doc?
Oh, it is a lot of fun. I encourage all your listeners to do it. Go try your hand at a comedy club, and you have not lived until you stood in front of a room full of drunk college kids trying to get them to laugh. And so every word is important. And I kind of stumbled on it. I was a lawyer by trade. I would do some classes from my previous bosses, my previous firm. And no one came up to me afterwards saying, oh, wow, you're a great legal mind, or well, now you're going to make us a bunch of money. It was always, oh, wow, you're funny. So I decided to go with what the good Lord gave me. And I have not looked back since. I cannot believe I've been doing legal comedy now for about 8 years, and the lights are still on, which that surprises me. But
I got a question for you, buddy. Which way are you making more money, through comedy or through practicing law? And I don't mean to insinuate myself into your business too much, but I am curious.
Yeah, right now, definitely the legal comedy is dominating my time and budget and all the resources. And so that is definitely, now I do have some, it's taken over my practice. Now I do have a couple of practices I still maintain, because I want to stay active. I want to stay sharp. If I'm going to talk about legal issues, I got to at least be in the game. So I have a couple of cases I keep going, and one of them actually might go to the U.S. Supreme Court. So I'm excited about that. But no, it's definitely the comedy is the way to go.
Let me ask you this. Is there anything coming up on the Supreme Court calendar other than the reference you made to the New York case we should be looking at?
Well, the abortion case, the right to life case, that is huge on so many different grounds. On one, it's huge because of the leak. I mean, so many Americans now are seeing how the Supreme Court works, where you get 9 justices. They all like each other's. Theoretically, they all hang out, and they basically are creating law by just swapping opinions back and forth. I want to take you back to 1992, Planned Parenthood v. Casey. This was the case to overturn Roe v. Wade, and just the Chief Justice William Rehnquist is writing the majority opinion. Rumor has it that on the eve of that opinion coming out, Justice Kennedy switched sides. And so the majority opinion then became the dissent. The dissenting opinion then became the majority opinion. And so might that happen this time? Might a justice switch sides at the last second to change what we all think is going to be the majority opinion? Who knows?
But Joel, let me ask you this, buddy. Don't you think this is an exercise of the Supreme Court passing this off to the states? There's a reserve law. Am I correct? You're probably more familiar with that than I am. Issues that were not spoken to or do not come under the Constitution are left to the decision of the state. I mean, I don't think that the Supreme Court is necessarily inclined to find it unconstitutional, perhaps, but to say let each state resolve it on its own terms, which means, you'll have to go hunting for states that are favorable to your political liking, which is what we're doing today now anyway. People are going to states based on favorable gun laws, something as crazy as that. And why should this topic be any different?
Lou, you are smarter than 95% of all Americans. If you were to ask the average American...
First of all, you just misspoke. That's disinformation. I'm calling D.C. right now, Joel. Who's the person in charge of who's the D.C. police? Department of Homeland Security. Expect a call from my Yorkers. Go ahead, Joel.
All right. So, yeah, if you were to ask the average American out there if they think overturning Roe v. Wade, what that would mean, they would all say, well, that means I don't have a right to abortion. No, that's not what that means. That means who gets to decide that issue? 9 unelected justices at the federal level or the state house, your local legislature. And so, like in California, New York, you better believe that you will still have a right to abort your baby if that's what your heart chooses to do after Roe v. Wade is overturned, because in those states, the laws still protect that right. In many other states, it might be different. The point that you just pointed out is it goes back to the states, because why should we let 9 justices in D.C. who have never stepped foot probably in Kansas and enjoyed our great barbecue decide such an important issue as when does life begin?
You know, I don't want to go off onto this topic of abortion because it's the slippery slope in this culture today, the attachment, the emotional attachment to it. But I would think that the populace as a whole would understand that we have rape, incest, and ectopic pregnancies, which really should be exemptions. I don't care where you go. You have to let it be. You just touched on it. When does life begin, number one? What really troubles me, Joel, and I don't really want to get into a protracted discussion because it's driven, but people are suggesting that at birth we terminate the babies. I mean, we're going to see people charged with homicide. I'm telling you right now, maybe that's what's necessary. We need to take this into a criminal court to determine if there is a crime being committed here. This could get real dicey, but, you know, you hit the nail. I just want to know from the scientists and the medical professionals, not the politicians, when does life begin? Is it a brain signal, right? Because, you know, people lose their brain signal. They call them brain dead. You know, they're on support. Is it the heart? Just give us some guidance, which we seem to lack every time we go near something, including the pandemic. I think you might agree with that position.
Here's something I find very fascinating, that in Planned Parenthood v. Casey, the Supreme Court said, whoops, we got it wrong. Now we need to change when we think life begins. Hold on a second. If you have any screeching music, now's the time to insert it. But stop and pause for just a moment. What do you mean you were wrong as to when life began? Because a lot of people were just aborted on the thought that they were not alive. Now you tell me that we just terminated their life. What are you going to say in 5 years from now that you were wrong today? I think that's a fascinating issue. It's one that I am not well equipped to define. I just find it interesting. The Supreme Court said, whoops, we got it wrong. So sorry. Let's move that line back a few weeks.
Yeah, I'll tell you, it's a dangerous topic to speak to, especially if you're a man. I always kid around when people talk to me about it, and I ask them if I have stupid stamped on my forehead. We're going to take a quick break, Joel. We're going to come right back to you guys. This is Between the Lines. We have Joel Oster, a rather preeminent attorney, but apparently quite a talented comedian as well. He's tried a number of cases presented before the Supreme Court. We're going to be right back. So let me tell you a little bit about Buzzsprout. Very interesting concept. Basically, it allows you to set up your own podcast. One of the most advantageous things about using Buzzsprout is it's user-friendly. So I encourage you highly, if your inclination is to create your own podcast, please look into Buzzsprout. And by the way, we use it. Guys, I'm here today with Joel Oster. He is a very well-informed attorney. He's presented a number of cases before the Supreme Court. He's written a book I suggest you take a peek at, Debriefing the Law with Joel. We're talking about a myriad of topics. Excuse me, his podcast, just to correct myself, his podcast is what I just mentioned. His book is called UnDue Process. I apologize to you, Joel. I'm getting my podcasts and my books commingled here. But we're talking about a number of these issues. We both don't like politics. I think we're both truth-driven. And I also think we're both confused by the short-sightedness in this government today. And I try to keep things simple. I live by KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. And I just don't understand why we don't have some form of a voice that is going to ask everybody to kind of dial it down a little bit, pull your horns in, think about what we're doing, what we're saying, how it's going to impact your children in their future. Can we get into your book a little bit, Joel?
Sure.
Go ahead, buddy.
Yeah. UnDue Process is the book that we produced this last year. I wrote it actually with my son, Zach Oster. And You mentioned Comedic Debriefing of the Law, the name of our podcast. That actually was the name of the book as well. The first name of the book was Comedic Debriefing of the Law. There is freedom in going commando. And the whole thought behind that was there was freedom in actually learning about the frailties of the law, where the law has messed it up. So our book, now called UnDue Process, is we recount all those stories where the law got it wrong, because a lot of times it's really hilarious to see lawyers, judges mess up the legal process. But the point I want to drive home with that book is this: what do you take of the fact that the people who run the legal profession are so messed up? They're the ones charged with creating the laws, enforcing the laws, interpreting the laws, and we have a lot of screw ups in that process. And so what is the takeaway from that? Here's the takeaway. You know what? You have freedom to just love one another, to treat your neighbor with respect and kindness. I think I call it BICOTA. Be ye kind one to another. There is no law against that. So just bring common sense to all your relationships. Goodness knows you can't get the law to bail you out.
Let me ask you this, Joel. Can you give us an example of one of these, I would say, inconsistencies humorously attached from the book? Can you just talk to one real quick?
Oh, there's so many of them. I'll just say there's one case in Florida where you got a shock jock who thought it'd be a fun entertainment to castrate a pig on live radio. I don't know if you've ever tried that. It's going to sure get a lot of laughter from your folks. I'm just tongue in cheek, obviously. Yeah, it's animal cruelty, but he decided to castrate a pig on live radio. The pig died during this process. So you got this shock jock in town who's doing this crazy thing. A criminal investigation was commenced against this shock jock for animal cruelty. Well, there's another shock jock in town who was behind this. And so this shock jock called that person a rat and his wife a whore. Again, all these things going back and forth. Were they running for political office at the time too? I'm just curious, because that's normally the language we're using today during the presidential. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Joel. I didn't mean to interrupt you. You are right. They are well qualified to run for politics. But the lawyers then got involved because there was a defamation lawsuit. And so as a trial strategy in this really crazy lawsuit, you got to understand, lawyers, they like the limelight. They want to be in their name in the press, and they want the news to cover them in the nightly newscast. And so they decided to come up with this strategy to get their opposing counsel, the lawyer on the other side, to get him drunk, get him in a car, get him busted for a DUI, just to score some points with a jury. And so that's what they did. They sent their smoking hot paralegal to the bar that this other lawyer went to every night, sweet talked him, got him drunk, finally said, hey, would you be a sweetie and go move my car? All right, well, she did call me a sweetie. I guess I got to do it. And so she did contact her boss and say, hey, Operation Drunk Dunce is in motion. Let's go, guys. So they call the cops. They get this guy busted for a DUI just to score some points with the jury. And so, again, that's just one of many different tales that we tell in the legal world where lawyers have kind of lost sight of what is real. And yeah, those are the ones in charge of the legal profession.
Well, here's something I'm going to say, and I hope you don't take exception to this. We are both academics. I was going to go to law school. Ironically, I went into the police department. I won't give you the gory details as to why I never went further. But in D.C., we have too many lawyers, my friend, and we have too many academics. I'm going to have to ask you, are you old enough for John F. Kennedy?
No, I'm about 10 years after.
Okay. Well, they coined an expression during the Kennedy administrations that referenced the best and the brightest, all the Ivy Leaguers. And this is what I tell people. Look what they've done to your country. I think we have too much intellectualization with problems and too many damn lawyers in D.C. because you and I know what they do. I've been in the law enforcement community 49 years, Joel. Every time a lawyer comes near something, I cringe because it gets exponentially more complicated.
That's right.
And expensive, I might note. And at the end of the day, all we're really doing is settling a case, which I could do without a lawyer, to be very candid with you.
Yes.
But I'm just concerned about the direction the country's going, because common sense, which you just referenced, seems to have left the discussion, which is why we're in such a quagmire. I don't understand how things got so complicated. I don't understand how, the expression, you see the handwriting on the wall. I don't get this. The country's on the slide, and they're all in there having, brandies at the end of the day and smoking cigars. I've been there. I won't tell you which clients.
Right.
But this is like we have the institution run by the inmates. Come on.
True
and
story.
Don't go using my lines.
All right. This is a true story, not a funny story, but a true story. So I got a call from this lady who was a public school teacher, and one of her kids' mother was just killed in a car wreck. And this teacher called me up and said, Joel, can I actually pray with this student? They're grieving. Their mother was just died in an accident. Can't I pray with this student? And I'm going, why are you calling a lawyer? This poor kid is grieving. Screw the law. I mean, just do whatever this kid needs. Be there for their kid and let the law figure it out later. But we got it all topsy-turvy when we think we can't do good because the law might get in the way.
I got to ask you another question, and I'm not trying to put you in a corner, but I know you see what's going on in our major cities, right?
Oh yeah.
I mean, at what where I'm just trying to struggle. Who's not seeing what's going on there? Earlier in the show, I referenced Gavin Newsom and Hochul. You cannot go to Los Angeles. They have an active LAPD detective, Jamie McBride, who on national television came out and said, do not come to Los Angeles. It isn't safe if we can't protect you. I don't think there's any question. All our major cities have gone to hell in a handbasket. But why is there where's this inability to understand the boundary here? It's like we've run amok, Joel, and no one seems to have the wherewithal to understand you've got to have boundaries and consequences in life. They start with us as children, and they follow us all through our adulthood until we leave here. What's going on here?
I don't know, but I do think that you should not look to the law as being your savior, being the solution to the problem. I think Ronald Reagan said something very similar to that. But there is no law, and if there is, ignore it, about just doing good to your fellow man and your fellow neighbor. There's no prohibition against it.
Are you? How old is your son? May I ask, Joel?
I have two, and they're 22 and 19.
So you must have some concerns about their future, as I do for mine.
Oh, exactly.
I mean, I have to tell you a little secret. I was a little boy. I was born in 51. So I was a little boy in the 50s and 60s.
Right.
This was a different America, and that doesn't mean we didn't have problems. There were issues that needed to be addressed. Civil rights was one of them, this debacle called Vietnam. But compared then to now, we were living a Walt Disney epic, and I'm not sure that's a good term to throw around because they got one foot in poop in Florida right now with DeSantis. But I just don't. What are we doing to the future of our children here? I mean, where's the break point on this? I don't get this.
Yeah, though I will tell you that I think there are a lot of really sharp young kids out there, and so I have hope. I have future. I've seen some of them. I'm just hoping they rise to the top. I'm excited about. At least the kids that I know and their prospects. Hey, you know what? Move to the Midwest. Move to Kansas. This is where good barbecue, good NASCAR, and who knows what the future is going to hold for them.
Maybe a little bit what you're alluding to is less being more. I'm born and raised in the city of New York. I was born in Brooklyn, pretty much grew up in Manhattan. I survived Studio 54's days. I knew the owners, and I lived in a damn place. I just am concerned about what these kids are going to have. And I do want to say one thing. There is no question that we are products of our environment. And the demographic of young people where you're sitting versus where I came from is vastly different. I think it's incumbent upon us as the big people to provide them some leadership and some answers. They're entitled to some answers as to why things have come unglued. But I do want to say one other thing that I've observed. I think less and less people are parenting. I think it's more and more difficult today to parent than it's ever been. That's no excuse not to. I tell people it's harder to parent than not parent. But we owe them an explanation, and we owe the public an explanation as to why this has gotten so wildly crazy here. I have to say something else I just wanted to brush on. You may have picked up on this, but Chuck Schumer told two of our Supreme Court justices, one of them Kavanaugh, we're coming for you. Right. And then I listened to Nancy Pelosi 2 weeks ago refer to the Supreme Court justices as dangerous. Did you follow that comment, by the way?
I did hear about that.
I mean, what in the wide world of sports are we thinking about here, Joel? Seriously, I mean, these are the people running the country.
I know, and they have to understand the response to some of their comments and how people will react to it. I do fear for the Supreme Court justices. I really they're under lock and key right now. They're in hiding as well. They should be, because their life, I think, is at danger. I think here is a situation. I'm not even going to go there, but yeah, it is Republicans, Democrats, liberals, and conservatives. I wish that they would just navigate towards the middle, where the vast majority of Americans agree. We even talked about it earlier. We talked about the right to life. I maintain this, and I don't want to go into details because it's not what your show is about. I think I have found a middle road where 90% of the Americans are in agreement when it comes to right to life. I don't think it's a controversial topic. I think we've made it one because it allows for us to separate parties when they're campaigning for office, and they can fundraise off on it. I think 90% agree on the middle ground.
Hold on that thought for me, buddy. We're going to be right back. I have Joel Oster, a very intelligent, insightful attorney. He's presented quite a number of cases to the Supreme Court. We're going to be right back, guys. We're back. I have Joel Oster, I believe. I want to make sure I pronounce it right. Joel is an attorney. He's presented quite a number of cases before the Supreme Court. He has a book out currently, UnDue Process. He has his own podcast. He's certainly worth looking into. I would tell you that the podcast, by the way, is Debriefing the Law with Joel. Our podcast, by the way, is BetweenTheLines.tv. No disrespect, Joel, but we're touching on a myriad of topics. And, it's interesting. We're from different parts of the country here. Joel's Are you born and raised in Kansas, Joel?
I am born and
raised in the city of New York, and the likeness in our thought is startling. But the question is, why aren't other people sitting in Washington, D.C. thinking, or their thought process like-minded to ours, And he's pointing out a very interesting point. They want to continue to poke the fire to keep us divided. One thing I say, Joel, all the time is I firmly believe that the media intentionally misrepresents the racism issue here and anti-Semitism issue and the gender issue, because I have to tell you, my experiences, people are just struggling to get through the day. I don't care if you sit or you stand when you go to the bathroom. I don't think about your religious denomination. This thing about race, it's getting better. There's no question. We made mistakes in the country. Learn from them, move forward. But I think the media is actively stoking the fire with us and misrepresenting the volume of people that have these bad feelings towards issues involving transgender. I have to tell you, Joe, when I was hanging out in Studio 54, I had so many people walking into the bathroom with me. I needed a scorecard. And you know what? I didn't care. And they tell you the other thing today, I don't care. Go be happy. Protect your privacy, which is another discussion you as an attorney probably can appreciate. Protect your privacy. Stop putting your business out in the street. I mean, I don't know how you feel about these issues, but, are we misaligned in our thinking here?
Oh, yeah. You just mentioned so many different issues, but I think you hit the nail on the head when you said the media likes to stoke the fire. They absolutely do. They're in it for the ratings. We've had yellow journalism in this country for well over 100 years, but the early 1900s when they came up with the term yellow journalism. And so you still see that today. They just want to get people agitated so they can watch the evening news. And it's very disheartening to me. I do want to make sure, though, that you were not misled when you had me on. You do realize I'm not Joel Osteen. I'm Joel Oster. I want to make sure you didn't think that I wasn't.
Yeah, don't mind me. I'm half asleep most of my day because I don't sleep at night. But I apologize for the mispronunciation of the word Oster. I want to ask you this: what's coming up on your next podcast? Where are you going? Where are you going?
No, I was just doing a joke on the whole Joel Osteen. You'd be surprised how many people think I'm Joel Osteen, the pastor from Houston. Have you heard of Joel Osteen?
No. I was raised 16 years Roman Catholic. Went to 16 years Catholic, so I don't follow religion.
All right. Google Joel Osteen. He's like he's a pastor of the largest church in America. So people see my name, they assume I'm him. Say, sorry, I'm not Joel Osteen. I'm Joel Oster. But hey, you're the one person who heard of Joel Oster and not a Joel Osteen. So I'm very happy.
Guys, let me correct myself. Joel Oster. It's been a display of moronic behavior on my part. No defense. Take responsibility. I believe in that. But I did want to ask you, Joel, do you want to speak about what's coming up? And how do they find your podcast, buddy?
Yeah, so this is a true story. Just go to your favorite podcast platform, whatever it is, Podbeam, iTunes, whatever. Type in Joel Oster. Scroll past the first 2 pages, which will be Joel Osteen. I'm not him. Get to finally Joel Oster, comedian of law. And yeah, we do a weekly podcast. Now, sometimes we might skip a week as litigation kind of takes over, but it is coming up in June, where we're going to be covering the Supreme Court. This is the Supreme Court sweep season. All the big cases, they hold off until the end of June. That's when they're going to be ready to go out on summer vacation for their next break. And so all the big cases are coming out in June. So we'll be unpacking all of those cases in our daily update, which is a YouTube video, and then also our podcast where we cover what is happening at the U.S. Supreme Court. I
got to ask you this, Joel. I want to get back on a fairly, not super serious topic, but a good question. I'm sure you're aware California lost the assault rifle ban and the magazine capacity ban, and it was appealed. Ninth District Court, was it? The Circuit Court?
Ninth Circuit.
Where's that case going, buddy?
Well, obviously, it's probably going to get sent back after New York Rifle. So New York Rifle, the Supreme Court's going to decide that what normally happens is all the other cases that deal with a similar issue get sent back and say, now I want you to take another look at it and issue another opinion consistent with our holding in this case. So it most likely will get sent back for another round consistent with the Supreme Court's New York Rifle case.
Joel, we got to rock and roll, but I appreciate you coming on. I hope this was as much fun for you as it was for me, because this was interesting going back and forth. I hope you'll come back also. And I just want to remind everyone, I think you should pick this book up, UnDue Process. I have a feeling it gives you quite an insight as to what's going on. I hate to call it the funny farm, but it's starting to look like the funny farm in Washington, D.C. You know, I came out of law enforcement, Joel, and I always refer to it at times as the institution run by the inmates. They may have us outdone. Guys, we're going to close for now, and I want to thank Joel Oster for, not Osteen, by the way, Oster for being on the show with me today and providing some insight and a little comedic relief, which I think is quite important today. And I do hope you come back so we can continue these conversations. Will do. Thank you so much. I'm Lou Palumbo. This has been Between the Lines. And I remind you, we're on at 5 to 6 today, WBOB 600 AM, 101.1 FM. And if you're listening at that hour, call in. Thank you so much, guys. Thanks. Thanks, Joel.